Well, tell me about the piano 6.
Okay, well...
I don't write things in order. I mean, you know.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Piano 6
word processing.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Piano 6 is the brainchild of Janina Fialkowska.
Oh.
And it springs from a conversation that I had with Janina about, because we're both Canadian,
yeah.
And we both actually live outside of Canada, and we both felt like our...
Is she in the New York area?
Yeah, she's living in Connecticut, just outside of the city. We both kind of felt like we owed the beginnings of our careers to small-town Canada. You know, I mean, that's how our careers started. So I think it started out that we wanted to find some way of making it possible again to play those kinds of recitals, because the rewards are much beyond monetary at that point. I mean, there's no way that we can go into Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan for the fee that ICM wants to charge. It's just completely out of the question. So we'd have to go in knowing that the fees would be very small, and that the rewards would be more from a feeling of sharing something with the community and all that. So so Janina really went to work at it and got a Canadian manager to agree to work specifically on this project for us, even though we're all separately managed otherwise. And we enlisted the services of Angela Cheng, Angela Hewitt, Marc-André Amelin, and André Laplante. All those spellings are somewhere in my webpage. It's all in there somewhere. And we now do this. We donate about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks a year, going into small communities in Canada, and playing recitals, and also giving school concerts. And I discovered I gave the first Piano 6 tour, it's now about 3 years ago, in Atlantic Canada. I was out in small towns in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and things like that. And I discovered right away that doing kids concerts and playing in schools in general was something that I really loved doing, and I really just had an immediate affinity to it, because I think there are a number of motivating factors for why performers perform, and why artists are artists, why musicians are musicians, and I've seen that there are some big differences. Like Murray Pariah, whose musicianship and pianism I have huge admiration and respect for. But I remember the first time I saw him perform, and I say saw intentionally as opposed to heard him perform, because I just remember watching him walk out on stage and bow and sit down, and he seemed very uncomfortable with the whole idea of performing, and he seemed not in a natural way, not all that concerned with opening his arms to the audience. I think his main concern was to play the way that only he can play, and not that he didn't care what people thought, but it's just, you know, one can argue that a true artist is someone who has to do what they have to do regardless of other people's expectations. You know, that's how you would define an artist, is that they have to be honest and personal to themselves, right? And that kind of artistry I have tremendous respect for, but it's not me, you know, like
ethos.
Yeah, and interestingly, I'm a grand student of Schnabel, because Adele Marcus studied with him, and she only 6 lessons, and she said that she learned more in those 6 lessons than every other lesson she had combined, and she referred to things he said all the time. But yeah, but my goal is one of sharing. You know, I want to bring people in, and I don't enjoy recording, and I absolutely love performing, and I feel like I can bring people in, and I can hold them here in my hands, and so playing school concerts became a completely natural way for me to bring people in and get kids very excited about music, and so, but that's what Piano 6 is about. I went on a tour. I went on the first really remote tour last fall. And I have always wanted to go up north. And Jane Colwell, who organizes the Piano 6 concerts, made a few calls, and she said, "Well, Jackie, there really aren't much in the way of pianos up there." And she said, especially if you're planning on going to Baffin Island area of Northwest Territories, just forget it. And I called her back a couple of days later, and I said, "Well, I don't think that's a reason not to go." And she said, "Well, it's just too expensive to take a piano. It's just horrendously complicated." And so that's when I had this idea, and I ended up getting a Roland FP11, I think it's called, or FP1 or something, a 88 key electronic synthesizer, and a Fender amp. And
You just did it with an amp.
yeah, and I trucked all around the Bath and Island.
Can you?
Oh yeah, just stick it in a station wagon is no problem. Yeah, and I was shipped at freight on flights and things. And
was it Roland?
Yeah, it was a Roland. Yeah. FP something, but it's their 88 key.
I shopped for those. I
Yeah.
have to interject. Just
Yeah,
for a minute,
yeah.
But I shopped digital pianos a few years ago. The Roland was the only one. They all sound.
Yeah.
The only one whose touch.
Yeah. No, I know you're right.
It wasn't the most expensive.
No. I went to Sam Ash and I tried a lot of other ones. I actually own a Kurzweil PC-88, and the Kurzweil's great and actually has a wonderful touch and a wonderful, really great piano samples and some very beautiful sounds. But it's big, bulky, and it's also a synthesizer more than it's just an electronic piano. And the danger of that is that, you can press a couple of buttons on that and get stuck and not figure out how to get a sound out of it because it's in some weird computer loop or something. Whereas, where the Roland it is straightforward. You hit the piano sound and just stick it and leave it there, and that's all you have to do. So
you traveled.
So I traveled with that, and it was a most incredible experience. I ended up in a couple of days. There's a town which on old maps is called Frobisher Bay, and on new maps is called Iqaluit, Iqaluit.
It sounds like an Inuit.
It is an Inuit name, yeah. And Iqaluit has about 3,500 people, all told, actually, or 3,000 people or something. It's the principal center of the entire Eastern Arctic in Canada, and there are 4 schools there. And in 2 days, I went to all 4 schools with this keyboard and amp, and I played for over 1,000 Inuit
grade schools,
students.
high schools?
Both,
Yeah.
both. 3 grade schools and 1 high school. Yeah, and it was rewarding. I was very concerned for months in advance about what kind of program I would play, because I wanted them to have a good time, and I wanted them to feel like music was something that they could relate to at my level. And so I kind of worked very gradually into the program. I started with. I started with a movement of the last movement of the first Beethoven sonata, which which is a very rhythmic kind of exciting thing where they could just get into the sort of the beat of the whole thing. Then I started talking about how songs are written, how songs are put together, over the course of which I played a Nirvana tune called About a Girl, which just has 2 chords. And they all knew the tune. And
Nirvana.
Yeah. Nirvana is the definitive grunge rock group from Seattle, which achieved more than its share of fame when their lead singer Kurt Cobain committed suicide. Right, he was the lead singer for Nirvana, and there is no more Nirvana because he's gone. But and then I played a Madonna tune, and I showed them how that was put together. And then I played a Chopin Nocturne, and I said, it's the same thing here, a melody and an accompaniment. And at that point, they were actually really listening, because I heard a couple of things that they knew, Yeah. And I mean, this is music that I listen to anyway. I have a huge rock and roll. I have a bigger rock and roll CD collection than classical at this point, which is embarrassing but true. Theme song from the Simpsons TV show, which I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I mean the composer for that, Danny Elfman, is the guy. He wrote the music for Batman, the movie, Tales from the Crypt on HBO, Nightmare Before Christmas of Tim Burton, and he's a very creative composer. I mean, he has these great sort of fun rhythms, challenging, fun stuff, and the kids just crack up when they hear this, because I mean they just immediately see Bart Simpson and all the craziness, I played a lot of different things. One of the schools, just to see if I could get away with it, I played an excerpt from the Berg Sonata, and at that point I had them, and they were listening, and
they come together for an hour. I mean,
yeah, they'll do about an hour presentation or something. But there's a lot of storytelling, a lot of question and answer, and a lot of making them feel like they can relate to music, and that they can relate to the piano being used as an instrument to express music. And the reward I get out of that, I seeing just one child's eyes light up. I mean you really put that in words. But it's a tremendous feeling, and that's I've talked to all the other pianists in Piano 6, and we've gotten together and given a few multi-piano concerts as kind of fundraisers for the project, and they're all agreed that that's the most rewarding part, is just the feeling that you are on a mission. Like on a real mission to share music and with as many people as you can.
You're normally traveling on your own thing. You're not traveling as a group.
Yeah, we're normally doing our own thing. Yeah, I mean, right now I think Marc Andre is on a project somewhere. I'm going to be. My next one is next March in Ontario, small towns in sort of northwestern Ontario, I think. So,
when you're in a town that has a Inuit culture, is there any sharing of music or art that they
I met a lot of artists actually, and I now have a burgeoning Inuit art sculpture collection in my.
I wonder if the soap's.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's stunning. Some stunning things. I was hoping to have a chance to hear Inuit throat singing, and I didn't meet anyone who around who at least was a practitioner at the time. So anyway, but that's the basic idea of the project. It's extraordinary, and it's a little bit in danger because we had corporate funding to get the project going. It's expensive. I mean, even though we're all playing for next to nothing, that trip was very expensive because of all the flying around. I mean, huge distances. I mean, you get in a jet plane and go for 2 or 3 hours straight north to get to these towns from Ottawa already. I mean, it's just like way out there. It was an expensive tour, and that tour was partially funded by the Canada Council. But we're really, we've been canvassing for support now, because I mean, it's a wonderful project, but it can't survive without help, so that's basically the idea. Yeah.
Is there any thought of including other instruments or singers?
I think eventually we should. I mean, we all kind of started out as pianists who, among other things, have the advantage that we can perform alone, which keeps the costs of it all down.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I mean, being a pianist, really the unique joy of being a pianist is the combination of the incredible richness of repertoire with the fact that it's an instrument that you can play as a soloist completely. I mean,
it's easier to make a one-man show.
It really is. I mean, look, I suppose you could argue guitar and harp even are, but the variety of repertoire is not the same. I mean, and also the sheer carrying power of a piano if you're in a big room or something. I mean, it's uniquely suited to like a one-person show. Absolutely, yeah.
I read in a couple reviews that you played an Art Tatum number. Now, so tell me, is that something you transcribed from a recording, or is it in the style? I mean,
I no, it's something I started to transcribe from a recording, and I was halfway through, and I was just dying because it was so difficult. Yeah. And I mean, it's a real fleet finger kind of thing. That kind of yeah. It's great music. It is unbelievable, and I transcribed about half of it, and then a friend of mine was talking to him about it. And he says, "You idiot! There's a score downtown." Just so I went and bought the score, and that tune that I was working on was in there, and so I was able to fine tune what I had been transcribing. But I played well. I've never quite understood why it is that most musicians feel this need to be confined to one type of music. Like, I feel like within the realm of classical music, I have an affinity for certain composers and not for others. I am not yet comfortable with French music. It requires a coolness that isn't in me. I'm not. I don't feel comfortable sharing the music of Bach. I love playing Bach for myself at home in private, but I've never really felt all that comfortable performing it. In the meantime, most of the classical music, romantic music, and certainly contemporary music, I feel tremendous affinity to. I also feel an affinity to jazz, and I also totally love rock and roll, and I still think that one of the greatest composers of the 20th century is Frank Zappa. So I mean, I can't help it. And I'm always shocked. I was very shocked at Juilliard at the kind of tunnel vision effect that I would see with a lot of students who weren't interested in what was out there. And I spent a lot of my Juilliard years in jazz clubs and rock clubs and things, and I just was interested in that kind of music. I don't know why, but...
Do you play jazz? Are you a jazz pianist?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I play a lot of jazz for fun. I've learned a lot of jazz like that, and I get a great kick out of playing it, knowing that I would never, ever be able to improvise with that kind of sophistication.
Yeah,
But I do improvise. I mean, and I do get together every once in a while with a bass player or something and just kind of jam, you know. And I think it's good practice. I like to improvise in Mozart cadenzas to a limited extent too. So I mean, improvising shouldn't be a lost art for classical musicians, but it is. Yeah, and I don't know why that's happened.
Do you have any jazz training, or?
No, I haven't had any formal training, and I'm starting to actually experiment. There's a few jazz pianists I know that I've been getting together with and trading. We've been kind of trading classical lessons or jazz lessons, kind of thing, you know, because I want to learn more. My vocabulary is a little weak in certain things like voicing and stuff.
I noticed in the Mozart Sonata this morning you illustrated beautifully the way of using touch, a variety of touches ranging from staccato to provide interest and variety that's tasteful. Without having to make a dramatic crescendo. I think that was the point.
Yeah.
Can you carry that into jazz playing? So I mean, it seems like a lot of jazz pianists are not very touch-oriented.
Well, even most...
Maybe some are.
Some are. There's Oscar Peterson is. Oscar Peterson has a tremendous variety of touch and is very sensitive to dynamic range. I mean, he will play everything from a very mellow, you know... You know, this kind of thing too, you know. I mean, no problem. He's got a complete range. Whereas someone like Tatum, who is called the greatest jazz pianist who ever lived, actually worked within a fairly limited dynamic range. I mean, he had absolutely incredible touch. But I mean, he did things that sound like he, you know, was studying late Beethoven that morning or something. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of variety and a lot of. It depends. It's more actually. I used to be very frustrated with rock music that I felt like, you know, you were either singing a ballad or you were or it was a big pounding rock number. But there was a tendency for it to be all loud, you know, and not a lot of subtlety. And I've actually noticed in recent years, even in the last 10 years, for the first time I'm feeling like there's really a more sensitivity to using just dynamic range as a addition to your palette of things you can work with, you know. So.
Do you do jazz performances at all?
Not officially, no. I play jazz a lot as encores, and I have included jazz in very limited amounts in recital programs. Yeah, and I've been playing Billy Joel encores too, though. You know, and I'm working on some Frank Zappa tunes now. That's my next. That's a little harder to transcribe, but it should. There's got to be a way. So.
Tatum had to have one of the greatest pairs of ears. Those changes.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
I think it was Bartok. Have you heard the story? Bartok went to a nightclub and.
Well, I know Rachmaninoff did. Rachmaninoff heard him.
And I think Bartok started to write down. He thought this was folk music, and he was putting on his hat as an ethnomusicologist. And Tatum was pretty blind.
Yes, he was legally blind. Yeah.
He said, "What's that guy or what's that cat doing?" He said, "He's writing it down." He said, "Tell him to forget it. He's never going to." Well, an apocryphal story.
Well, I did hear that Rachmaninoff had heard Tatum, and it was around about the time he was writing the Paganini Rhapsody. And I'm telling you, this variation. It's not such a stretch, you know. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's really got that kind of lightness in it, you know. So.
How do you help when you're teaching, or when you were learning yourself? How do you help a pianist? You had that wonderful phrase this morning. The repeated notes. We don't want the piano to sound like a typewriter.
Oh, yeah.
How do you build up, some technical facility without sounding like a typewriter, and avoiding a mechanical approach?
Well, when I studied with I studied with Marek Jablonski in oh, you know what that is?
Is it the rehearsal?
It's the rehearsing of jazz out in the pavilion. Yeah, that's going to be the same in any of these rooms.
You probably can't turn it off. Yeah.
No, I think it's just coming through the windows.
That may be live. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just coming through the windows. Yeah, that's okay. This is this will pick that. When I was in studying in Banff, I studied with a man named Marek Jablonski, Marek and Joblo. Yeah, okay, you saw that. Yeah. In as much as this is Clavier magazine, any excuse to mention all of these teachers would be great, because I mean they've all influenced me very much in pianistic ways. But one of the first things that Marek said was he said, work with singers, and work with string players, and work with wind players, and just listen to what they're doing. And I realized after that, that you don't need to breathe in order to play the piano. I mean, breathing is not something that affects how you play the piano. It's just something you do. But whereas all wind players and singers are completely dependent on breathing to define phrases and so on. And string players have bowing concerns, and they always have the variety of up bows and down bows, and how they're bowing and taking how many notes in one bow and all that. And all of this is lost on pianists who can literally sit and type. And that's problem number one. And then problem number two is the age-old truism about the piano, which is that as soon as you play any note, the sound dies. So pianists are in a constant state of creating the aural illusion that we are singing a melodic line which can grow and fade and whatever, when in fact that isn't happening. Every single note you play is dying. So you have to get to the point that it's like being David Copperfield and creating illusions. I mean, really that somehow you can create the illusion that things are happening that aren't actually happening. And those are two of the biggest problems that I hear. And part of it's just a sensitivity. I think you saw something that I was doing also, which I think is extremely important, is to remove the technical problem. And because
interesting. I've done that, but you then said you can do this with anything, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll try it.
Yeah, you can do it any. I mean, either you remove everything so that you're just playing single note of what the melody is, or if, let's say, you have a very difficult left hand, which is jumping around, but most of the interesting materials, just play with both hands. I mean, just do anything to make it easy, so that you can create a goal of what you want it to sound like. And again, this is a problem more or less unique to pianists because of the contrapuntal and polyphonic complexity of what we're often playing. There's a lot going on, and a lot going on often translates into a technical concern, which then becomes your overriding concern, and one tends to forget that the whole point of this is to create a phrase or something. So that I think really helps. I find when I don't have the chance to teach a lot. I am teaching in Banff this summer also for 2 weeks, and I don't have any private students at this point, except a few people who just occasionally play for me when I happen to be in town or something. But I find that the biggest problem when I'm hearing a very gifted young pianist who have technical skills and who have musical skills and are sensitive about sound and all that, and even understand phrasing and all of that, I always find that the one thing most likely to be missing is just a sense of direction. I hear a lot of good piano playing, very good piano playing, but it's still vertical and it's not horizontal. And that's creating that line. I mean, I still remember a couple of years ago hearing Richard Good play a recital that was, from the first note, it was all Beethoven sonatas, from the first note to the last was this incredible journey of discovery, and there was always a sense that you were being taken somewhere, and that the music was moving, and that you were moving with it, and it's an incredible experience. I mean, I suddenly realized that a couple of hours had gone by. It just, and that is that's something which I think is a less of a natural instinct for pianists because of the very vertical nature of just playing the instrument, and the somehow with I think if you're a singer or a wind player, the very fact that everything is dependent on your breath brings a kind of a humanity automatically into the music, and I think that wind players because they're making horizontal movements with a bow, and there's something string players, and there's also something about being a string player, which is the very different things you're doing with your two hands. I mean, you've got one hand responsible for all the technical issue, but your right hand and your right arm are making all the music, actually. And so you actually have a distinction of two things to work with. And again, for pianists, it's 10 fingers pressing down all the time, and to get beyond that is the biggest challenge, I think.
Did you go through a regimen, of Czerny and Kramer?
Tons of stuff. I remember when I was about 11, I decided that I should play through the entire book of Hanon every morning before anything else, and it takes like an hour and a half or something. But I did it for years. I just thought it was the right thing at the right time for me. I really needed to develop, more than anything else, basic coordination and independence. Played in different keys and different rhythms and experimented and just did all sorts of stuff. Yeah, and I remember trying. I think there was some. Like Dochnani exercises and all sorts of things. Then I started making up my own after a while. I made up my own exercises. One of them, which was really useful for me, was a voicing exercise, basically, in which I just do this and then do this and then thirds. But still that every note would always sound, and that I was really in control, and I could spontaneously bring out any combination and anything, and I just invented exercises like that would teach me to do things that I wanted to be able to do.
Do you play another instrument?
I have over the years. I have a desperate desire right now to play baritone sax and electric bass, but I mean, I took violin lessons when I was very young, which was a complete and utter failure. It was a total disaster. I had no instinct for it at all. I took clarinet lessons and trombone lessons and drum lessons when I was in high school, just for fun, basically. But it was interesting. At this point, I would really enjoy. Actually, to be able. I took guitar lessons for a while too. No, I didn't actually take lessons. I was kind of self-taught, but I was really into it for a while. I mean, there's a rock group when I was in high school called Genesis, and I just wanted to be able to play one of their tunes. And I mastered one Genesis tune on guitar, and then I dropped it, and I never played it again. But yeah, I mean, I would like. I'd like to play bass in a band. I think if I really worked on it, I'd be able to play it well enough to just barely get away with it.
Because you spoke sort of orchestrally or instrumentally in the music this morning.
Well, yeah. Sure. I mean, something. It's a bit of a myth, One should not be trying to make the piano sound like a cello. One should be making the piano sound like a piano in the most beautiful way possible. But it's very helpful to think. When you're playing a slow movement of a Beethoven sonata, it's often helpful to think of the texture of a string quartet because in a string quartet you do have four players who are working in a horizontal fashion, and a common failing of a lot of piano playing is to ignore the linear quality of what's happening in the left hand, and the fact that there can often be a shape or a direction or something in the left hand. It's often missing, and cellists are the first people to notice it. Send a cellist off to listen to a piano recital, and I'll tell you after a few minutes whether or not this person is at all sensitive to a bass line. I mean, because that's their life.
And you mentioned the pianists of the older generation. That would do things with inner voices or left.
Yes, right, and who were freer to be more creative. I think pianism has gotten a little bit stuck. It's like this whole PC business has taken over. I mean, I think pianists are now very worried about what is politically correct with phrasing and dynamics, and if I do a repeat, can I do anything different, or should it be the same, and should these trills all start in the upper or the lower note? And I mean, I have really little patience for that. I know that there are greatly respected academic opinions about whether trills should start on the upper or lower note and depending on this or that, and I have complete respect for it, but you can get very caught up on that and miss the whole point.
We act as if at one time in history it was a big deal. I'm not sure. Maybe it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, I think
maybe they would have.
Yeah, and just do what they want. I think that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but. In many ways, I am not a purist about playing the piano. I'm not a purist about those kinds of things, and I am not a purist about I was just trying to think of another good example. Well, fingering, for example. I mean, if I can find a fingering that, in my opinion, is more effective, maybe easier even, and I think it serves the end result well, I mean, I won't hesitate to do it, even if it's what some other pianists might think of as cheating, like taking things in the right hand that are supposed to be in the left or whatever. But if the end music is what I want, then I don't have a problem with it. Similarly, I've also often come up with fingerings that will intentionally make something harder because I think it should sound harder. I mean, there's some music, Brahms and Shostakovich come to mind, as composers whose music should often sound like a struggle and shouldn't sound. I mean, the first piano concerto of Brahms, there's a common, Now, that's very difficult the way it's written, but I have heard a lot of pianists do this. It sounds like bad Liszt or something, it's just wrong, and the point of this, I think, is it should sound like you're killing yourself to be heard, that's sort of part of the point. I'm going to get myself something to drink because my throat is just...
I'm coughing too. Well, we'll take
a short break.